Welcome to more World of Warplanes content from the Noble Q. This video is a first look at the Reward American Tier 8 light fighter, the McDonnell XP-67 Moonbat. Hello there. If you're watching this video in December 2023, then this aircraft behind me is probably what you're grinding for or considering buying. It's the reward for the Holiday Manoeuvres event over Christmas 2023. It's the McDonnell XP-67 Moonbat. And the World of Warplanes team described this aircraft as being capable of extremely fast climbs, rapid traversal across the map, and packing quite a punch thanks to the armament that you can see in these wing roots, which is 8, count them, 8 60 cals or 0.6 inch or 15mm machine guns, autocannons. That depends on where you draw the line for that sort of armament. This is going to be an abbreviated review. We're going to take a look at the numbers for the aircraft and we'll see just how well those claims by the World of Warplanes team stack up. Before we do that, let's have a quick look at the livery that comes with this aircraft when you obtain it. In the paint shop, we can see that there is this reward livery, and this is the one that you will get. I have a second one here on the press account, which you won't get, and it's scales. And I suppose some of you may find that attractive. I don't think I do particularly. Nevertheless, it is quite striking. What does it give you? It gives you 5% aircraft experience. Alternatively, you can mount either the universal schemes or the seasonal schemes for the normal bonuses. If we look at the nose art, scroll down, we can see again there's a gift item. There it is. Let's bring it into view so you can see it. Nothing particularly spectacular, and it's the usual 5% crew experience. And finally, the emblem. Lots of scrolling here. There we go. It's a rather natty bat. In fact, so natty that I think the makers of the 1960s Batman series might be having a word with the World of Warplanes if they were still about, because it's quite similar to that. And that gives you the normal 2% crew experience. Okay, having dealt with that, let's go and have a look at the numbers for the aircraft. Here we are with the spreadsheet showing all of the Tier 8 fighters. There are a lot of them. I can scroll this way, see that there are plenty appearing as we scroll along. If you don't know how this spreadsheet works, there's a link in the description below to a video that will explain that to you. Go and have a watch of that and then come back and watch this. So let's start with the gun armament for the P-67 Moonbat, and it is straight away good news. The rating is best in class, 39, cumulative DPS of 680, which outguns a K6, incidentally, the Tier 7 German light fighter. And this kind of weaponry DPS is actually commensurate with heavies at Tier 8. Yes, there are some that will outgun it, and you wouldn't want to sit in front of a heavy because it's got more hit points, but you are able, for instance, in theory, to outgun a P61. If we look at the details, we've got 860 cal machine guns, autocannons. It's up to you to decide whether it's machine guns or autocannons. Each giving 85 DPS, rate of fire 450, and a range of 2,297 feet, which is serviceable. Some of you may wish that was a little bit longer and might be considering long gun barrels. I don't, and I'll explain why a little bit later in the video. The auto-aim angle is a slight disappointment. It's pretty tight at 2 degrees. If you're 2 degrees off target, you will miss. The game won't correct your aim for you. If you scroll your eye across, you can see that there 3 is not unusual. And that's much more comfortable. So this is a little bit of a miserly auto-aim angle. The dispersion angle, however, compensates for that. That's the way that the shells spread out as they leave the muzzle of the machine gun or cannon. 0.4. Now 0.5 would be a really good rating. 0.6 is common. 0.4 is excellent. So these are pretty accurate guns, provided you know how to aim. And the overheat time is a fairly generous 10 seconds. Shell velocity, I've struggled with the shell velocity a little bit. It is 1312, so it's not dreadful, but it's just slow enough to make the lead slightly tricky. So bear that in mind. But here's our first piece of good news. This does look like excellent weaponry, and anything that gets in front of you, certainly Tier 8s, is probably going to regret it. Survivability, well, despite it looking like a heavy fighter, the survivability is very much that of a light fighter, and on the low end of the scale for a light fighter at that. The rating is 8, the hit points 340, damage resistance 46, which is a little bit low. We do have the normal fire resistance of 60 though, so that's comfortable. When it comes to airspeed, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The rating is 58, which is not great for what is supposedly a high-energy fighter. Certainly if you read the puff given out by the World of Warplanes team on their website, this is not great. However, the cruise speed is actually second best in class at 317 miles an hour. However, the boost maximum speed is a letdown at 460. And if we go across, we can see that this is, apart from the Pogo, it's not going to outpace any of the high-energy fighters. And in fact, it's pretty similar to most of the turn fighters, which are the ones that are coming into view as I scroll along now. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. The boost duration is not bad at 10 seconds. However, it's not immensely good either. The dive speed is poor for a high energy fighter. This is more like a light fighter dive speed, and I guess this is because of drag coming off the engines, etc., etc. But as you can see, there's a 497 LA9 over here, and in fact some of the light fighters can actually dive more quickly than this plane. So straight away, diving in the classic style of a P-51H Mustang is not necessarily going to be your optimum way to play this aircraft. Manoeuvrability, it definitely has the manoeuvrability of a high energy fighter. The rating is 56, and with some exceptions, that's pretty much worse than any of the high energy fighters that are on show here. The Horton 229, it has a good chance of outturning, and the J8M, the JL1A37 as well. But you are going to have to be really careful, depending on how you build the aircraft, about almost every other fighter at tier 8. Because you won't be able to outturn them. Just going through it very quickly, 11.4 seconds turn time. Roll rate is a poor 100 degrees per second. Controllability is poor as well, 79.9. Aircraft is definitely going to slide through the air when you give it an instruction to change its direction rather than instantly respond to your instruction. Minimum optimum speed up to maximum optimum speed, 206 to 412, gives you an optimum range in which these characteristics don't degrade of only about 206 miles an hour, which is actually worse than most of the other aircraft on show here. So it very quickly starts manoeuvring worse than what is already a fairly poor set of manoeuvrability figures quite quickly. Stall speed is a pretty good 99. You might be able to slam on the brakes and make somebody fly past you if you're good at that sort of thing. At first blush, the altitude performance looks good. It's 74, third best in class. Maximum altitude, optimum altitude rather, is 8,202. The ceiling is 14,000, very nearly 15,000 feet. But here's where I take issue with what the World of Warplanes team. The statement is, this swift fighter is capable of extremely fast climbs. Relative to what? Because there are none of the high energy fighters in this comparison that climb more slowly than this one. Even the Pogo, which has got a poor rate of climb at 476 feet per second, is marginally better than this plane. And I just don't see it. This plane is not that good at climbing, certainly against energy fighters, and frankly, it's only just beginning to show an appreciable advantage over some of the turn fighters right at the end here, and in some cases not by much. The Key 94 too is going to stick with it in a climb long enough to be able to give it serious grief. So, not sure what the World of Warplanes team is saying there. This is not a fast climber, and that's disappointing. I've calculated the power to weight ratios. Now, we don't know anything about drag in the game. My guess is that it is implemented. However, we don't have the numbers for it. But it stands to reason that with two engines, the chances are this airplane is fairly high drag. So it's extremely disappointing to see that the power to weight ratios are the worst I've ever calculated. I'm putting that carefully because I haven't calculated all of the power to weight ratios for every aircraft in the game. But of the aircraft that I have, and I've done lots, these are easily and eye-catchingly the worst. And that suggests that this aircraft won't accelerate particularly well. Well, I played the aircraft a little bit, and I will say it does feel a bit like a slug, both in terms of its controls and in terms of its ability to get going if you slow it down. So you're going to have to watch that. If you slow this aircraft down, perhaps behind a bomber with all its engines shot out, you're going to make yourself vulnerable because speeding up is going to be quite difficult. At least it feels that way. So as a high energy fighter, this is not a sleek beast. It's actually something that you brute force up to a high speed, and then you'd be well advised to keep it up at that speed and not slow down for almost anything. we look at the worst in class figures, there's the survivability coming up red in many respects, not surprising there. Maximum dive speed is actually worst in class. Roll rate is worst in class. Controllability isn't quite worst in class. The pogo's slightly worse, but it is pretty poor. That's third worst in class there. And the power to weight ratios are really, really bad, and they're worst in class, bright red there. So, lessons learned. What looked like might be a very interesting high energy fighter has got several drawbacks, but the big plus point is undoubtedly the guns, and anything that gets in front of you and doesn't know what it's doing, either in a head-on or you catch in a low energy configuration, provided you can lead properly. And as I say, I'm just struggling slightly because of that low shell velocity, is going to know about it. So let's go and discuss builds. Here we are back with the P-67 on the festive airstrip, and when you first get this aircraft you will see the following. You have 5 equipment slots, 1 on the cockpit, 1 on the airframe, 2 on the engine, and 1 on the forward firing weapons. That's interesting. However, it is locked until you specialise the aircraft. On the consumables you also have 5 slots, 1 on the cockpit, 1 on the airframe, 2 on the engine, of which 1 is locked until you specialise the aircraft, and 1 on the forward firing weapons. Now I have specialised the aircraft, and at this early stage I'm very far from settling on my preferred build for this aircraft. This was my first thought. Because some of the statistics on the high energy side of the aircraft aren't great, the maximum boost speed, the climb rate, I went for a pure speed build, which you can see in front of you. So we've got the gun sight on to improve the accuracy, polished skin, high-speed gas turbine, uprated engine, and before we come to the next bit, I'll come down to the consumables. The survivability of the aircraft is good enough to allow the mounting of a first aid dressing package. Backup pneumatic control assist. Yep, the fire resistance is good enough. Emergency control system, I think that's the right choice, even for a speed build. Engine cooling, and then again, to try and compensate for some of the speed issues, I've put on the improved mixture control rather than a restart bottle. And as we're here, we'll just say that, of course, I've mounted universal ammunition. And in the post-build effects, you'll see the effects of my choices here, but of course that will be combined with the pilot. As far as the guns are concerned, I've decided to live with the somewhat short range, but definitely serviceable. My view at the moment is that if you take on an aircraft, you jolly well want to go in to destroy it if you possibly can, and therefore you want to improve the DPS, and that leads you to mounting gas-operated action. Your other choices are the long gun barrels in order to improve the range. That will also preserve the accuracy, but these guns, okay, they've got a nasty auto-aim angle, but generally the guns are pretty accurate, so I don't think that's important. And I don't think improving a burst length of 10 seconds is particularly important for the reinforced bolt carriers. Now, maybe there's a bonus characteristic there that might be of interest, but we're not going to go into that depth in this video. So gas-operated action for me, and we'll see what that does in the post-build effects. Now, I've cut to a different build here, and this build would be probably from the point of view of combating the dratted P-61. You can make that pretty manoeuvrable, and many people do. Can you pull the same trick with the P-67, even though on paper it's not particularly manoeuvrable aircraft? And the answer is yes, you can. And to that end, you would change the polished skin to a lightweight wing frame, and in my case I've taken off the high-speed gas turbine and put on the lightweight power unit. I think that's the better choice because I prefer to improve what is an already good cruise speed. You might take the opposite view and try to improve what is a rather poor boost maximum speed, and therefore you'd keep the high-speed gas turbine. But we'll have a look at the effects of this particular build, also in the post-build effects. Before we do that, let's talk about pilot skills. The P-67 being a reward aircraft, it is of course a crew trainer, so you're free to put any of your tech tree pilots, or indeed pilots from other premium aircraft, provided they're American of course, into this plane. With that first build, which I would call the speed build, you could put a pilot like this in, and I've got a highly trained pilot because this is the press account. It's my XF90 pilot, and what we have here are skills that, wouldn't necessarily choose precisely for a P-67, for instance. I might be tempted to drop the battle tested and use the skill points perhaps to go on to resilience instead. However, the general thrust is about right. So what we have here is aerodynamics expert, aerobatics expert, engine guru 1, engine guru 2, marksman 1. And of course what you could do, since this is a speed build, is drop the aerobatics expert, maybe the battle tested. That gives you 4 points to play with. That will allow you to put on marksman 2, perhaps take off the cruise flight, put on, if you preferred, resilience, and then maybe you put on eagle-eyed with the extra point. So that would be for the high-speed build. Even as it is, this is a pretty good pilot for that scenario. If you go for the manoeuvrability build, then I suggest you'd probably be looking, A, to use Elise Clark if she's got a number of skills already. So let's put her in. And bear in mind that her P51D master skill will not function in P67, which I'm sure you know, but this special skill, the maneuver expert, does, and it stacks with the maneuverability skills. So you go aerobatics expert, aerodynamics expert, and then possibly you'd be working on marksman 1 and marksman 2, and then maybe you want to be working up to evasive target, which is something I would do with my light fighters usually these days, and maybe is worth doing it this if you are choosing to fight P61s. And since this video is being made in December 2023, let me put this thought in your mind. There will be a number of people who will be flying P61s almost constantly throughout the event, which is going to last into January 2024. If you choose to get this aircraft early by buying it, then you're going to have to meet a lot of P61s, certainly on the EU server, maybe even on the NA server, in which case, at least for a month, this manoeuvrability build may be the way to go, and using Elise Clark in the plane. Okay, let's go and have a look at some post-build effects. So here we are with a spreadsheet that illustrates the effects of the choices I made for the two builds you've just seen. The base figures for the P67D are in columns C and D. You've seen this before in the aircraft statistics section earlier. Then in columns E and F, we've got the high energy build or high speed build, and the difference between the two is expressed in absolute terms in column G and in percentage terms in column H. In columns I and J, we have the manoeuvrability build, and the difference between that and the base figures is expressed in absolute terms in columns K and in percentage terms in column L. Let's start with the guns. And we'll look at the high energy build first. That's this one. We've got the rating on the guns up to 43, and the cumulative DPS calculated by me to be 800, a 17.7% increase. It says 17.6 there, but that's a rounding error. It's interesting, the UI says it's 746, so it looks as if, to me, the World of Warplanes team have got a slight problem with the calculation of the DPS in the UI, or it is really 746 and they're not applying the effects of the equipment and pilot skills that I've got properly. I don't know which it is. I'm going to assume that we've got 800 DPS here. That comes from increasing the DPS per gun by 15 to 100 and the rate of fire up to 530 from 450. No effect on the range. We've improved the auto aim angle slightly by 0.1 of a degree. It's nice to have. I'm not sure it's going to be significant. What was an already good accuracy in terms of dispersion, that's the way the bullets spread out as they leave the muzzle of the machine gun or cannon, has gone down to 0.32. That's a 20%, 21% improvement. So that's really good as well. No effects on the overheat, and the shell velocity, of course, you cannot change. The rating on survivability has remained the same. However, we have actually increased the damage resistance by a small amount. You're not going to notice it. We've lost, because of the use of the uprated engine, 14 points worth of fire resistance. That's still in the range where I feel comfortable mounting a first aid dressing package. Look at airspeed, and this is where the big change is. It's gone up from 58 to 73. We've got the cruise speed up to 413, which is 96 miles an hour faster, 30% increase. Boost maximum speed has gone up to 515. That's 55 miles an hour. 12% increase. However, we have lost 1.5 seconds of boost. Maneuverability, slightly mixed bag, but basically we've lost a rating point to 55. The turn time has gone up to 11.48 seconds, which is a 0.75% worsening, so neither here nor there. Similarly, we've improved the roll rate by 2 degrees per second, which is neither here nor there. We just come down here, we'll see that we've lost yaw manoeuvrability by 1.8%. So almost as you were with the manoeuvrability. And then on the altitude performance, I think that 64 is incorrect. Let's just double check the UI very quickly. Manoeuvrability 75. We'll correct that. So we've gone up by 1 point. No change to the maximum or optimum altitude or the ceiling, but we have improved the climb rate quite considerably to 563. And maybe we're now getting into that kind of territory where, in fact, the plane really is quite good at climbing, although other people could improve their aircraft relatively in the same way, so you don't know. However, this is a good high energy build. Other effects on the guns, we've got an improvement in the cooldown rate by 10%. Survivability coming from battle tested. Damaged aircraft controllability is 25% improved. The engine damage resistance has gone down by 12%. Pilot injury resistance is also down by 12%. Actually, I think that's wrong. Just double check that. It's actually meant to be a +8 on this build. It's -12 on the other build. Just correcting that on the fly. So the pilot is slightly less likely to get injured, which is good news. On the airspeed, we've got an improvement in the cooldown rate of the engines by 10%, plus 25.4% acceleration, no boost. That could be significant. That's quite a big step up. Similar sort of improvement on acceleration with boost, and 12% improvement in dive acceleration. Now, if I'm right and this aircraft is a bit of a slug, that's welcome, all of those acceleration figures. Already touched on the manoeuvrability loss there in terms of yaw manoeuvrability. Just point out that with the consumable of choice here on the second engine slot is improved mixture control, which is used in order to increase the engine thrust by 5% and the cruise speed by 2%. A pilot is highly trained. Skills are battle tested, acrobatics expert, aerodynamics expert, engine guru 1 and 2, marksman 1, and then cruise flight as well. On the second build, the manoeuvrability build, what's changed? The polished skin has been substituted by a lightweight wing frame, also rated at 478, so that's ultimate level, fully calibrated. The high-speed gas turbine in this case has been taken off, and the lightweight power unit has been put on, again, 478, fully calibrated at ultimate level, and there are no other changes. This means the guns are exactly the same as before, so we'll skip over those. Survivability, still rated at 8, but this time, because of the use of the lightweight wing frame, we've lost a few hit points, 16 of them, 4.6 down. We've also gone down from original figure of 46 to 45 on the damage resistance, and because of that uprated engine, we've gone down to 46 again. Airspeed, slight improvement. The rating's gone to 63, so 5 units improvement, 8.6% improvement there. We've got the cruise speed up to 355, and that's the only effect from this build on speed, apart from the ones down here, which we'll talk about in a moment. Where you'd expect the big impact is in manoeuvrability, and bearing in mind that the pilot is Elise Clark, so it says there, we've got it up to 75, and this is going to allow you to outturn P-61s, almost every single one of them that you encounter. Turn time has come down to 9.51 seconds, which is a 16.5% improvement. The roll rate is still not great, but it's a lot better at 129, and then no other effects on the other items in the manoeuvrability header. And then the altitude performance back to 74, and we've got 476 climb rate. Just going to double check that climb rate of the previous build. I think it's 533. That's a miscalculation there, which is why the improvement's only 75, but it's still healthy. Other effects on the manoeuvrability build. Cooldown rate on the guns is the same, of course, and with the same improvement. Survivability. Now, there isn't battle tested on Elise Clark, but the maneuver expert skill that she has subsumes the battle tested skills, bonuses and advantages, and therefore we've still got the 25% damaged aircraft controllability. Loss of 10% of wing damage resistance. This time we do lose 12% of pilot injury resistance. I can't spell that apparently. There we go. And we've also now got a loss of engine damage resistance, 17%. And that's typical with your manoeuvrability builds. The aircraft becomes more vulnerable. And the way to go there is perhaps if you can get to the higher point skills, you might put on evasive target. Airspeed, 23.4% acceleration without boost. That's still very welcome. Now we've only got 8% acceleration with boost. No dive boost acceleration. and that shouldn't be there, so we'll take it out. Manoeuvrability, we've got a 24.2% increase in the yaw manoeuvrability, and this time, because we're maybe dogfighting P-61s, if we lose our engine, we can put it back in with the restart bottle. Pilot, Elise Clark, special skill, manoeuvrability, manoeuvre expert, which stacks with acrobatics expert and aerodynamics expert, which is also there. And then we've got engine guru 1 and marksman 1. A more fully trained pilot, Elise Clark, might have, for instance, as I've already mentioned, evasive target. So that sums up the effects of my choices as they currently are for 2 separate builds on the P-67. That's my look at the base statistics of the P-67, plus the effects of a couple of builds, a high energy build and a manoeuvrability build, which may give you some ideas on how you might build this aircraft when you get it, or if you already have it. And of course you might actually blend those two builds, or you might conceivably bring in some reinforcement, because with the DPS off these guns, you might decide that what you want to do is go chasing bombers. Well, I hope you found that helpful. What comes next is an unnarrated battle, my first in the P-67, but this is where I'm going to leave you. And until the next time, this is the Noble Q, signing out.
Show me what you can do, pilots. Let's roll.